Welcome to the channel. Today, we are going to discuss the strategic overview of the detector-blinding exploit. This infographic serves as our master map, bridging the gap between theoretical quantum security and the messy reality of hardware engineering. At the top left, you see the ultimate danger of this attack, the illusion of security. Our real-time monitoring dashboard shows a perfect, healthy connection with a 0% error rate, yet the attacker knowledge bar is at 100%. By forcing a transition from the quantum Geiger mode to the classical linear mode, an adversary like Chris can steal the entire key without triggering a single alarm. Moving to the tactical execution at the bottom left, we see the three-step intercept-and-resend attack. Chris measures Jennifer's photons, checks the bases, and then sends tailored high-power pulses to John's blinded detectors. As the comparison table shows, this effectively replaces single-photon quantum sensitivity with deterministic classical control. Finally, look to the right, the defense. To restore the quantum shield, we build a cyber fortress using 3 layers of protection. We implement photocurrent watchdogs to detect blinding light, efficiency randomization to make the hardware a moving target, and finally, the MDI-QKD architecture, which removes trust from the detectors entirely. This infographic is the blueprint for understanding how we identify, execute, and ultimately defeat one of the most powerful attacks in quantum cryptography today. Let's dive into the specifics. As we bring this deep dive to a close, we leave you with one fundamental truth. Security is physics, not just algorithms. The detector-blinding attack serves as a powerful case study for the GRC and security community. It proves that even the most elegant mathematical proofs are only as strong as the physical hardware that executes them. To achieve true cyber resilience in the quantum age, we must look beyond the code and develop a deep understanding of the physical layer. By identifying the hardware gap, neutralizing side channels with watchdogs, and ultimately architecting for zero trust with MDI-QKD, we can ensure our secure communications remain truly impenetrable. Thank you for joining us for this session of our Quantum Security Deep Dives. Stay ahead of the quantum race. Subscribe to AI Quantum Secure YouTube channel now to ensure you don't miss our next deconstruction of emerging quantum hacking techniques. I'm your AI quantum architect. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and stay secure. See you on the next one.
We have covered a significant amount of technical ground today, from the physical transition of photodiodes to the architectural shift of MDI-QKD. To summarize, the detector-blinding attack is a stark reminder that security is only as strong as its weakest physical link. By aligning our defenses with the AI Quantum Secure brand standards, we ensure that every layer of our infrastructure, from photocurrent watchdogs to efficiency randomization, is built to withstand real-world exploits. At AI Quantum Secure, our mission is to provide you with the deep technical insights needed to stay ahead of evolving threats in the quantum era. If you found this walkthrough valuable, please hit the like button and share this video with your colleagues in the GRC and cybersecurity communities.
While the detector-blinding attack is formidable, it is not unbeatable. We conclude our deep dive with the physical solutions used to secure the channel, hardware patches. To restore trust in our measurement devices, we implement a defense-in-depth strategy. The first line of defense is the photocurrent watchdog. As you can see, this is a simple but highly effective current sensor placed directly before the APD. Its sole function is to detect the high average current characteristic of Chris's blinding continuous wavelight. If it detects this abnormal energy surge, it immediately shuts down the system before a single bit can be compromised. Complementing this is efficiency randomization. By using a variable voltage controller, we can randomly fluctuate the detector's sensitivity in real time. This turns the threshold power, PTH, into a moving target. Because Chris can no longer predict exactly how much power is needed to trigger a click, he cannot tune his bright pulses accurately without triggering a massive spike in errors and our alarms. By monitoring the energy levels entering the device, we ensure the hardware remains firmly within the quantum regime. These immediate countermeasures ensure that even in the face of sophisticated blinding attempts, the quantum shield remains intact. Thank you for watching, stay secure, and I'll see you in the next Quantum Deep Dive.
We now arrive at the final, most devastating consequence of this exploit, the failure of privacy amplification. In a standard quantum protocol, privacy amplification is the mathematical safety net. It is an algorithm designed to distill a secure key by compressing it based on the detected error rate. If John sees errors, the math assumes Chris was watching, and it compresses the key to squeeze out any information Chris might have stolen. But look at the hardware-to-math gap on your screen. Because Chris has artificially suppressed the error rate through detector blinding, John's math is operating on false data. John's dashboard shows an estimated security of 99%, leading him to believe that a low error rate equals high secrecy. In reality, the actual entropy is 0. Because the algorithm doesn't see a spike in errors, it doesn't compress the key enough to remove Chris's influence. The privacy amplification step, which should have been John's final line of defense, performs a superficial compression that leaves the final key fully readable by the attacker. The algorithm hasn't failed. The data feeding it has. Chris has successfully weaponized John's own security math against him, resulting in a final key that is compromised from the moment of its creation.
We conclude our walkthrough with the most deceptive element of the exploit, the illusion of loss. In any secure communication system, we rely on the data we don't receive just as much as the data we do. From John's perspective, the silence on the line is perfectly normal. He looks at his long-distance fiber connection and sees what he expects, photons being lost to natural attenuation and physics. He assumes that the fiber is simply long, and the missing signals are just a byproduct of the environment. But look at Chris's reality. That silence isn't natural, it is curated. Chris is performing active filtering. He is essentially deleting every instance where he might get caught, every basis mismatch, and every measurement error. By suppressing these signals, he ensures that the only data John actually records is the data Chris has already intercepted and controlled. This is the ultimate evasion. The system attributes the silence to physics, not malice. John remains unaware because the attack doesn't look like a hack, it looks like the laws of the universe. Thank you for joining this AI Quantum Secure deep dive. You now understand how the detector blinding attack shatters the quantum shield by exploiting the hardware gap. Don't forget to like and subscribe for our next analysis of quantum vulnerabilities. Stay secure.
In the final tactical phase of the exploit, we see how Chris remains a ghost. Phase 3, managing the mismatch. In a standard quantum protocol, when the measurement bases of the sender and receiver don't match, it naturally produces random results and errors. These errors are exactly what John's system looks for to detect an intruder. However, Chris has an evasion strategy. Because he has already blinded John's detectors, John's system is no longer capable of guessing a random bit from a single photon. It now requires a high-power pulse to register anything at all. As you can see in the diagram, if Chris identifies a basis mismatch, he simply sends nothing, effectively a vacuum state. Without a bright pulse to overcome the blinding threshold, John's detectors remain silent. Instead of registering a bit flip error that would spike the QBER, John simply records a loss, a missed photon. In the real world, fiber optic lines lose photons all the time, so this appears perfectly normal. By turning potential errors into simple channel loss, Chris ensures the QBER stays low and the attack remains completely hidden. John's security dashboard remains green, while Chris continues to curate a perfect stolen key.
We now move to the final stage of the exploit, Phase 2, the targeted trigger. This is where Chris exerts absolute remote control over John's hardware. Having intercepted Jennifer's original photon, Chris now knows the bit value. To pass this information to John without raising an alarm, Chris sends a tailored, high-power laser pulse. Notice the condition on your screen. The pulse power, P bright, is specifically tuned to be greater than the blinding threshold, P threat. Because John's detectors are already blinded and operating in linear mode, they no longer wait for a single photon. Instead, they respond to this classical surge of energy. As shown in the diagram, the pulse is directed to force a specific fire, in this case, triggering a click on detector D1. John's system dutifully records a bit 1, exactly as Chris intended. By matching his measurement basis with John's, Chris ensures that this classical override looks like a legitimate quantum detection. The result is a perfect, undetectable forgery of the quantum key. In our final section, we will explore the three-layered cyber fortress defense strategy designed to detect these bright pulses and restore the integrity of the quantum shield.
Now that the detectors are blinded, we begin the first stage of the tactical execution. Phase 1, intercept and measure. In this phase, Chris takes a physical position in the middle of the communication channel. He effectively cuts the fiber line, intercepting the individual photons Jennifer is sending to John. As you can see in the diagram, Chris isn't just listening, he is performing a measurement just like a legitimate receiver would. He selects a basis, either rectilinear or diagonal, to extract the bit value. However, there is a critical physical consequence to this action. According to the laws of quantum mechanics, the act of measuring a photon destroys its original quantum state. The photon destined for John is gone. In a standard system, this missing photon would cause an error and trigger an alarm. But because Chris has already blinded John's detectors, he has the power to replace what he destroyed with something far more predictable. In the next phase, we'll see how Chris uses the information he just stole to rebuild a fake signal that John will accept as genuine.
Now that we've neutralized the quantum sensitivity, we can replace quantum randomness with mathematical certainty. This is where Chris gains deterministic control over John's data. The physics of this exploit is defined by a simple ratio. By calculating the threshold power, or PTH, Chris can determine exactly how much light is required to force a click in the blinded detector. Using the formula on your screen, where ITH is the threshold current and eta is the responsivity, we can see that for this specific hardware, the magic number is 0.4 milliwatts. The implications of this graph are staggering. In the quantum world, measurements are probabilistic, but in this blinded classical state, if Chris sends a tailored pulse higher than 1 milliwatt, the detector clicks with 100% certainty. If he sends anything below 0.4 milliwatts, the detector remains silent with 0% certainty. By simply tuning his laser power, Chris has replaced the complex probabilistic nature of quantum mechanics with a simple classical on-off switch. He isn't just eavesdropping, he is actively remote controlling John's measurement outcomes bit by bit. Next, we'll see how John and Jennifer can fight back by building a cyber fortress to detect and neutralize this level of control.
In this section, we examine the physical phenomenon that makes this entire attack possible, the Dazzle Effect. To understand what Chris is doing to John's receiver, think of a human eye. If you were staring directly at the sun, you cannot possibly perceive the faint flicker of a candle flame. The sun's intensity simply saturates your vision. The same principle applies here. By flooding the internal chamber with high-intensity light, Chris creates a saturated state within the avalanche photodiode. As you can see in the diagram, the legitimate quantum signal, the single photon Jennifer sent, is still there, but it is being completely ignored by the hardware. The detector is no longer listening for the subtle, probabilistic signals of the quantum world. Instead, it has been deafened. It is now sitting in a dormant, classical state, waiting for nothing less than a massive power spike to trigger a response. Chris has successfully neutralized the gatekeeper. Now he is free to send his own tailored pulses to tell John exactly what to record, effectively rewriting the quantum key in his own image.
To execute this attack, Chris must perform what we call the anatomy of a break. This is a physical transition where we force John's hardware to abandon its quantum nature. Look at the comparison on your screen. In its ideal Geiger mode, the detector is a quantum device. It is triggered by a single photon and provides a binary click or no-click response. This is the foundation Jennifer and John rely on for security. However, Chris introduces blinding illumination, a bright, continuous wavelight that floods the avalanche photodiode. This physically lowers the bias voltage across the diode, forcing it into compromised linear mode. In this state, the detector loses its quantum sensitivity entirely. It no longer clicks for single photons. Instead, it behaves like a classical analog sensor that only responds to high optical power. By shifting the hardware from the quantum regime to the classical regime, Chris effectively turns John's sophisticated quantum receiver into a simple, predictable light switch that Chris now controls. Now that the detectors are blinded, let's see how Chris uses this classical control to steer John's measurement outcomes without ever being detected.
Now we arrive at the most chilling aspect of this exploit, the invisible intrusion. In a standard eavesdropping attempt, the laws of quantum mechanics act like a tripwire. Any interference by an attacker typically creates noise, causing the quantum bit error rate, or QBER, to spike and alert John and Jennifer immediately. But the detector blinding attack is different. It is the ghost in the machine. By forcing the hardware into a classical state, Chris can intercept and resend the key with surgical precision. As you can see on the dashboard, the system reports full health. The error rate remains well within the normal range, and the connection status stays green. Yet behind that wall of false confidence, Chris is achieving total interception, reading every single bit in real time. John and Jennifer believe their communication is perfectly secure, but the foundation they are building on has already been compromised. Next, we will break down the exact tactical execution Chris uses to maintain this deadly silence.
To understand how this exploit works, we first have to address the gap between theoretical security and engineering reality. On the left, we see the promise. Quantum cryptography is built on the fundamental laws of physics, offering what we call provable security. This theory relies on a critical assumption that our hardware behaves ideally, perfectly translating quantum states into digital data. However, on the right, we see the reality. This is the hardware gap. In the real world, we rely on physical sensors called avalanche photodiodes, or APDs, to detect single photons. These components are subject to the messy limitations of analog electronics, things like thermal noise, dead times, and saturation thresholds. It is specifically within these saturation thresholds that we find our vulnerability. Think of it as the Trojan horse of analog electronics. By exploiting the physical properties of these sensors, an attacker can force them to stop behaving like quantum devices and start behaving like predictable classical switches. Let's look at how Chris, our hypothetical attacker, transitions these detectors from the quantum regime into this classical state.
Welcome to AI Quantum Secure. I'm your AI quantum architect, and today we're deconstructing a vulnerability that challenges the very core of quantum cryptography. In the world of theoretical physics, quantum key distribution is often described as unhackable. But in the world of engineering, we have to account for the gap between perfect physics and imperfect hardware. This session, part of our Quantum Security Deep Dive series, focuses on the detector-blinding exploit. This is a sophisticated physical attack where an adversary uses the inherent properties of real-world components to bypass quantum security proofs entirely, all without leaving a trace on the system's error logs. As we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. It's a small action that helps us tremendously in creating these technical deep dives for you. Now, let's see what happens when the unbreakable shield of quantum physics meets the reality of the laboratory.